why are we here? Because we're here. Roll the bones. No, seriously, why? Why am I here? Why am I at World Fantasy Con this week? Why is connecting with other writers so important? How is it that we can have all of this success, all of this magnificence thrust upon us as writers, and yet we still doubt ourselves? Those are just a few of the things I talk about in this episode of the Stark Reflections podcast.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 384 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. I'm recording this episode from my hotel room at the Sheraton, Niagara Falls, basically less than, 800 meters from the falls, to use Canadian terms, just across the border in upstate New York, basically in Niagara Falls, New York. And I am doing this episode as a solo episode, merely because I'm at a conference. I'm at World Fantasy Con, and I don't have the time to do the editing of an interview, etc., because it does take several hours. And I want to take advantage of my time here at World Fantasy Con, which is kind of going to be one of the subjects I talk about in this rambling reflections from the road from World Fantasy Con, and it's the 50th anniversary, or the 50th World Fantasy Con, and I'm thrilled to be here. But I'm going to forego much of the introductory matter for this episode, except to say a huge thank you to all of those who support the podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections, as well as buymeacoffee.com/Mark Leslie. Your support, I really appreciate it. It means the world to me. And a huge shout out and thank you to all my patrons and my coffee buddies. I love what you're doing to help support me, and I truly appreciate it, and I hope I am in return giving back not just to you awesome supporters, but to the entire Stark Reflections community. So that's it for the introductory matter. I'll get to comments, etc. in future episodes. I know it's going to be tight for the next few weeks as I am on the road, but let's roll a bumper and let me get to the main content. Okay, so rambling reflections from the road. Here I am, as I mentioned, at Sheraton in Niagara Falls, New York at World Fantasy Con. I'm in the hotel room, and because it's less than just under 2-hour drive from where I live in Waterloo to get here, I was able to pack a little microphone. I got a little microphone here. I've got my little mini Yeti, so much better than the built-in mic that I would normally use when I travel, because I don't travel. The mic is big enough that it, for the suitcase, just a little bit too much. But because I have the vehicle, I can take a few more things. It's a lot easier when you're in a vehicle than when you're trying to squeeze yourself onto a plane. So I am in the hotel room, so obviously the acoustics are not going to be as great. I do have the curtains closed to try and prevent some of the bounce from the sound, but I'm sitting at the desk across from my bed, got the mic propped up. Maybe, hey, why not? I'll just take a little picture that maybe I can use. And this is, yes, you're getting this live. The picture that you see that I will be sharing is going to be me sitting in the hotel room, my laptop, and looking. I'm going to try it. So I'm going to pose as if I'm actually speaking. Well, I am speaking. I'm speaking into the microphone, but I'm not looking at the camera, and I'm pretending like this was sort of a candid shot that was taken. But it was really just me holding the phone with my right hand a few feet away. There you go. So when you see that image shared, probably for the show notes and potentially on social media, you know that I was talking and recording this as I was taking that picture. Isn't that just that meta reference? Isn't that, I don't know. I get excited about stuff like that. But all that is to say, I'm here and I'm wanting to get an episode out. And when I stayed up way too late last night, hanging out and talking with some friends, and wanted to get a little bit of extra sleep this morning, so I didn't quite get up at 5:30. I slept in an extra 45 minutes. That cut into some of the other work that I needed to get done, and therefore, it takes me less time to do this kind of episode. But I hope there's something in this that you're going to find valuable. I think there will be. So what I have in front of me is I have a little notepad open with 5 bullet points. 4 of them actually have things written there. You know, basically the first one says coming to WFC, World Fantasy Con. And then I get into like whatever. It's usually just one line of what I'm going to talk about. So, because I like bumpers, let's roll a small bumper, and I'll get to point 1. Coming to World Fantasy Con, point 1. I guess I should say that again. Let me do that again, and I'm not going to fix this, except maybe that burp I just did. I'll probably edit that out. Number 1, coming to World Fantasy Con. So, I haven't been to a World Fantasy Con since I think it was 2006 in Toronto, Ontario. And I went to that one. It was my first and the last one I'd been to. And it was like, this is major international con. And I don't go to a lot of those. I tend to go to more regional ones, et cetera, et cetera. And also, since probably 2008, 9, 10, I started going to conferences less as an author and more as an industry representative. I mean, when I started working at Kobo in 2011, prior to that, when I was working at an independently managed bookstore at McMaster University, and I was on the board of directors and became president of the Canadian Booksellers Association, I was at a lot of conferences as a book industry professional, as a bookseller in that role. But then starting in 2011 with Kobo, I started going to more conferences as Mark, the book industry guy, not Mark Lefebvre, the book industry guy, not Mark Leslie, the author. And I've been, especially if you listen to the last episode, 383. Yes, I can do the math in my head and everything. You know that I have been writing for 40 years, and my first book came out 20 years ago. And Mark Leslie, the author guy, is a very important person to me. And I talk about him as a different person, but I often have to wear multiple hats. And unfortunately, I mean, the hats I wear, all within the realm of writing and books, still feel comfortable and familiar. So that works out nicely. But I realized that since roughly 2010, 2011, I've been going to conferences mostly, that's not always the case. There's the occasional one that I slip in, but let's say if I go to 14 different conferences in a year, maybe 1 or 2 of them I'm there as an author, and the other 10 I am there as an industry representative. And I realized that I've let Mark Leslie down. It happens, especially dedicating myself to helping other writers, and this happens to a lot of writers, is the more time we dedicate to helping others, the less time we have to doing our own writing. And I know for a fact I would get a heck of a lot more writing done if I didn't have this podcast, if I didn't do the work I'm doing with Draft to Digital, if I wasn't on the board of directors and the company Wide for the Win and doing a lot of work in that group, if I wasn't doing a lot of background support for conferences like Superstars Writing Seminars, I would have a lot more time for my writing. However, I get an intrinsic reward from doing that work. So I'm not going to stop. I just received something this morning from a gentleman I was helping who just wanted to publish a memoir. And I walked him through how to do it with Draft to Digital. And I was just so happy that I was able to help somebody realize an important dream. And I don't think I could ever let that go. It's too important to me. It's too important to me to know that there are people out there who I can help by leveraging some of my experience. And so, all that being said, is Mark Leslie often gets put on the back burner. And it's really cool to be coming here to World Fantasy Con as Mark Leslie. I mean, I actually, my name tag says Mark Leslie and then Lefebvre in brackets below, because some people may know me only as Mark Lefebvre. Other people know me as Mark Leslie. And it was really intriguing because, the conference sort of started yesterday a little bit. There was one major panel or workshop, and it technically starts today, which is October 17th, Thursday, October 17th, when I'm recording this. But I'm here with more of my authorly guys than I am the industry guy. Although the two panels I'm doing, I'm going to be talking about AI audio on a panel later this afternoon, and on Saturday I'm on an evening panel, but the future of indie publishing, and so that's interesting. So I'm kind of putting on my industry hat for these, as well as my authorly hat, because I can speak about both things. But anyways, I'm here at World Fantasy Con as Mark Leslie, and I realize I haven't done a lot of stuff as the author guy. And that I've done quite a bit of author stuff in the last month or so with my new release, actually making a big deal. And that kind of, that's an important element, because I realized how many books I put out where I just release the book and move on. And very seldom do I make a big deal, like do a book launch, a physical in-person book launch. And I'm doing a number of events like that. The official launch at the beginning of the month for One Hand Screaming at Counterpoint Brewing. The Ottawa launch at Independent Bookstore at Spaniel's Tail. And then this major pre-Halloween event on the 29th at Arabella Beer Park, where they're tapping the keg. And it's kind of like the relaunch into the Halloween season. And I missed that. I'm going to get to that in another point, but I really missed just being an author in the community. And the reason I'm here is, I guess, a few people. So I was having dinner with some folks at Superstars Writing Seminar. So Philip and Jessica and Elise were at my table. And we were talking, and they said, "Oh, you going to World Fantasy Con?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I haven't been." Mumble. And they said, "Yeah, but it's really, I'm pretty sure it's pretty close to where you live. It's in Niagara Falls, New York." And I like hanging out with my author friends, and I don't often get a chance to hang out very often with my authorly friends. It's very limited, right? It's like a weekend or a week when I'm at a conference or whatever, and there's so many different people to hang out with. And I thought, wow, it's so close to home. It's like less than 2-hour drive for me to get from Waterloo to Niagara Falls. And it's just across the border. So, I mean, seriously, across the border, you can practically see the hotel from where the border guard's asking me what I'm doing with a skeleton in my passenger seat. I'm explaining, well, I'm a horror writer, and I'm going to World Fantasy Con. He goes, "What's that?" I said, "Well, it's a science fiction and fantasy and horror, and it's an international conference that moves around. Next year it's going to be in England, but this year it's in Niagara Falls, New York, and that's where I'm going." And I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this for myself. I rarely do it for myself. I mean, not that I don't get personal benefit out of all the conferences I go to. I definitely do. Because again, I wouldn't do it if I didn't get intrinsic value or rewards or whatever. But coming to World Fantasy Con was really important to me, because I'm coming here as an author, and I'm just not, I have no hair to let down. But not that I'm letting my hair down, but it's a little bit of a different guise as when I'm here officially representing a company. Now, that being said, in a couple conversations I got into last night, of course, people are going to ask questions about Draft to Digital. And of course, I'm going to help them. I'm going to tell them and share some tools and systems and things that I think would be important for them to know, and also solicit feedback so I can provide that feedback to my colleagues and help continue to improve the systems, etc. So you never turn that off. But I'm here on my own dime and enjoying myself. And so again, a little bit more loose in terms of not having to be there with an official representation, hat on, but just being myself. And I think I miss that. I definitely miss wearing the Mark Leslie hat, because I will get to this later in these rambling reflections, but that's an important part of who I've always wanted to be. And last night, as we were hanging out in the lobby and we're waiting for one of our mutual friends to come back downstairs, gentleman, and I'm ashamed to say I forgot his name, but somebody I remember having met at ErieCon in Niagara Falls, New York. I used to come to as a writer guy, and many times, because again, it was so close and it was a wonderful conference. It's where I first met Kevin Anderson and Rebecca Mesta, and became good friends with them from that sharing of beer at a very intimate small conference. So, but last night when I was in the lobby, a gentleman approached me. Speaking of Kevin, he had a copy of the Rush anthology 2113, stories inspired by the music of Rush, co-edited by John McFetridge and Kevin J. Anderson. And I remember Kevin and I were having beers at the Winking Judge, on the patio of the Winking Judge in Hamilton, Ontario. And that's when he said, "Hey, I'm editing an anthology of Rush stories. I'd love for you to submit something. What song would you want to do?" And of course, after he picked me up off the floor, and then after maybe I stopped humping his leg because I was so excited, I said, "Well, Losing It, one of my absolute favorite songs from Rush." I said, "Is anyone, because Dave Farland and a whole bunch of other authors were already part of this anthology." I said, "Well, has anyone claimed Losing It yet?" And he goes, No. And I said, "Great, I'll write a song inspired by Losing It, and I'll write a story, I should say, inspired by Losing It." And I wrote the story, "Some Are Born to Save the World." And the song Losing It, and yeah, I'm going to get into Rush, because I do. What I love about it is the song opens and it talks about a dancer who is getting to a certain age where her body doesn't behave the way it used to, the aches, the pains, etc. And there's a line in it that I used in one of my sections for One Hand Screaming, because again, Rush Easter eggs is the echoes of old applause as they flood through her memories, and she remembers what it was like to be on stage and dancing in front of people, and now she's just in her bedroom trying to dance and not able to anymore. And then there's another part of the song. The writer stares with glassy eyes, defies the empty page. His beard is white, his face is lined and streaked with tears of rage. 30 years ago, how the words would flow with passion and precision, but now his mind is dark and dulled by sickness and indecision. So obviously it's about a writer who can't write any longer. That song had such powerful meaning to me my entire life. So writing a story about a superhero who is at that point where he is used to saving people and he can't anymore, I wanted to touch upon that. And so that was the story I wrote. I actually, interestingly enough, I wanted to include it in the revised version that I just released of One Hand Screaming, but it was just, well, I had to cut stuff because I needed it to be, it's just going to be way too long. And that was one of the stories I ended up cutting because it wasn't horror. It's horrific. There's a horror element to the fact that you just can't do the things that you were born to do. And how devastating that can be. Because as the song goes, for you the blind who once could see, the bell tolls for thee. And there's something about losing it that's so horrific and devastating, and it happens to everyone in different ways. Anyways, whoa, that was a long aside, but hey, this is a rambling reflection from the road. Ha ha ha. At least you don't have the traffic sounds. I'm not driving while I do this one. But that story was published in 2113, and it's one of those stories I'm really proud of, and Kevin was a great editor who helped me pull some really great elements out of it, because he saw the first draft and then he made some suggestions, and he helped me make it much better. And this gentleman had asked me to sign it, and he'd had a few of the contributors sign it, so I was so pleased that I took a picture with him. And it was one of those moments that never grow old. It never gets old. As a writer, you're standing around and somebody approaches you and says, "Oh, could you sign my book?" And it was interesting because he seemed so apologetic, and I was like, "Dude, you just made my day." Don't be like, because I'm chatting with a bunch of people, and he felt like he was potentially interrupting or whatever, and I was like, "Oh my God, you have no idea how meaningful and how poignant and how powerful that moment is when you asked me for my autograph. So thank you for that." So that's a kind of World Fantasy Con, coming here as a writer and just being part of that writerly world and just talking about writing. And of course we get into the business of publishing because I can't help that. But what a wonderful evening. And again, I've only been here, I just got here around dinner time yesterday and went out for dinner with some folks and then chatted till after midnight in the lobby with some folks I hadn't seen in a while, I guess since the last conference. So it was so great to see so many people like, "Oh my God, I had no idea you were here." I know there's going to be more of that, and it almost feels, I wish I could do something a little bit later with the podcast, reflect a little bit more. Maybe I'll do an additional reflections from World Fantasy Con, because I'm sure I'm going to have some amazing experiences. But all that being said, I'm going to roll the bumper, and I'm going to get into point 2 in just a second. Number 2, the nature of relationships in the writing world and community. I've already experienced this, as I mentioned, hanging out with people and friends and chatting, even this morning going down to Starbucks and just chatting with a couple writer friends. It lifts me up so much to be around people who get me, who understand me. And it doesn't mean that my loved ones and my good friends don't get me, but I was sharing this, I think I was sharing it last night. I was. We were talking about family members and stuff. My mom, one day said, well, I had nothing better to do because the power was out in the middle of the afternoon, so I read one of your books. It's sort of like it's the last thing I wanted to do, but I did because I had nothing better to do. And again, I know my mom loved me, so there's no harm there. But often our loved ones are not necessarily our readers or understand us as writers. Two of my closest friends that I've been closest friends with, since I was a kid, since I was 12, 13, 14 years old, were at my event in Ottawa, Steve and John. And they're two of the dearest friends that I love dearly. And they were at my book event. And it was so great to have them there because they rarely see me in my authorly guise. They just see me as Mark, the guy they know, who, yeah, of course, that's what he does. But very rarely have they ever been at an event where I'm doing my thing, either as an industry person or as a writer, because the writer guide tends to be a lot more hidden. And it was so cool to have them there when I was doing my talk. And I'm doing my talk, and I'm telling my ghost stories, I'm telling the backstory of why I published this book, and a little bit of the background of me wanting to be a writer and horror, and why horror is important to me, and why I'm scared of everything, yada, 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 yada. And we went out for beers afterwards. It was just so great to hang out with them again. But neither one of them bought my book. I don't think either one of them has ever really read any of my books. But I don't expect them to. Even though they're in them. There's so much of them. And so much of things that we've shared that ended up in my books. But even Yeah, it's weird, and I don't feel bad or negative that my friends haven't read my books, but even though I love them and they're close friends, that's not the kind of relationship we have. But the relationship that I have with the writers I'm hanging out with here, they understand in a different way, and we connect in a different way. And so much of what we do as writers is solo. Yeah, we connect in online communities and we message one another, and there's different ways we can support each other. But at the end of the day, it's between you and the the empty page. Going back to that Rush song, define the empty page is what we're constantly doing, and it's a really beautifully complex, terrifying yet fascinating and amazing and spectacular vocation. But here I am in one of the things that's the most important to me here at World Fantasy Con. Yeah, it's going and listening to some great speakers and panels and presentations and stuff like that. It's engaging cerebrally in learning more about the craft and learning more about the business. And just that alone is great. But the bigger thing for me is the relationships and nurturing those relationships with other writers, meeting writers I haven't met, or getting a chance to talk with a writer I may have briefly met but never really had a chance to sit down with. That is so critical. And I think we forget about that, particularly in the digital world. And of course, I'm thinking about that a lot as I'm working on my a book in hand and getting that finalized and ready for publication. But those analog, in-person relationships and how important those can be. That is one of the reasons why I'm willing to invest this time. That's one of the reasons why I think people are willing to invest. I was talking to a good friend of mine who's going to be coming to visit, and we were talking about, I'm getting to a certain age. I want to prioritize the people that mean something to me, the people that I care about, the people that I love, the people that I want most to spend time with and invest in. And I've I'm getting to that age as well where I was like, John, the one friend, I hadn't really talked to him every few years. Something happens. My mom died. He calls. His dad died. I call. Stuff like that happens, and we rarely would talk. But when we get together, it's like, it's like no time has passed. Of course, we have lots of stories about the ins and outs of day-to-day life that the other person doesn't know about. But anyways, those relationships in the writing community are what make me a better person, but also have endowed me with opportunities. And it may sound like I'm using people, but that's not the case at all. It may be the case where I've met somebody and I see where they can connect. Oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. And Rob Sawyer is such a great person at doing this, is saying, oh, you need to meet whatever, because I think you guys would hit it off because you have this in common, or I know you would want to talk about these things together. Those relationships are where so much of the magic happens. Yes, the magic happens by button chair, fingers on keyboard, or however you get the writing done. But a good part of opportunity and a good part of your opportunity as a writer come from connecting with people in whatever way you can, right? If you connect with them digitally, virtually, connecting with them in person. But to me, it's really important to connect with people in person because there's a lot of subtle nuances that you can just get with a glance across a table. You're having, dinner together. That would not come across on a social media post or a comment on something online. And I think that's all I have to say about number 2, because the next point, I'm gonna get a little bit more into some more personal stuff. This past month, launching One Hand Screaming, doing all of the events related to the book, and then coming to World Fantasy Con. I actually feel like a real writer again. And it's funny because of course I know I'm a real writer. I make money off my writing. But doing the in-person events, having people come to my booth, my table, at events, having people come to a book event at a bookstore or brewery or wherever it is, and being up there as the author and putting on that author persona and the guise and sharing my passion for storytelling and my passion for even speaking about writing. I can't express how magical and powerful that is. I talked about signing the book, and I'm going to be doing a panel today. I'm going to be hanging out with writers. I feel more me when I'm here hanging out with other writers, and I feel like a real writer just doing some of those events. And it's funny because they used to be terrifying, and I used to have to throw up before I spoke in public because I would get so nervous. Now, I guess I've gotten used to it. I've gotten accustomed to the nerves, and the nerves drive me and give me some energy. But I mean, I never get over the power and the passion of being up there and being in that writerly role. And that feeling like a real writer can be a really positive thing, but can also be a real negative thing. And I'm going to pause to roll the bumper because I'm going to now share the darkness of that feeling like a real writer. All right, number 4, feeling like a real writer, but also feeling like a failure. I mentioned earlier, I've been writing for 40 years. Got my first rejection at the age of 15, and hundreds of rejections since then. Rejections now often don't come from an agent or an editor, but they may come from either a negative review or no reviews, right? Like, I published my book to the resounding sound of crickets. And even, one hand screaming, all this work, all this effort, all this love, all this adoration that I put into it, all of this blood, sweat, and tears. I don't have a single review on Goodreads or Amazon or Kobo or Nook or any of the places that people have bought the book. And as experienced as I have, I think I counted 35, 36 books. It's difficult because when I've edited an anthology, yeah, that's technically a book of mine, and I put a lot of work into it. But it's different than, a novel I wrote or whatever, a collection I put together. So somewhere in the realm of 35 plus books. And having done this for a long time, I still face the darkness. I still face the imposter syndrome, and I still face the, why the hell are you wasting your life? You're a loser? Nobody reads your stuff? Which isn't true, because, they're buying the stuff, so who knows if they're reading it. But, you're making the sales, but you're not getting the reviews. Like, should that tell you something, Mark? That self-doubt creeps up so much, and it hit me really hard. So last weekend, I was at the Indigo in Cambridge, and there's a manager there who does the events, and she's so supportive. And that store is so beautifully supportive. They have, 4 or 5 of my traditionally published books on the shelf. There's like Haunted Hospitals, Creepy Capital, Haunted Hamilton, etc. They have those ones. But they also have several of my self-published books on consignment, and haven't gotten rid of them. They keep them prominently featured. And we did this event for One Hand Screaming. So I was there for, 4 hours? On Sunday, I think? Saturday, on the Saturday. And at my author table, I have Barnaby with me, and I'm doing my thing. And yeah, there were people who came up and talked to me and were really excited because they're really into horror, and we had some great conversations. And again, I sold some of my Canadian werewolf books. I sold some of my true ghost story books, and I sold some, I think 2 or 3 only, of One Hand Screaming. That was the one I was there to promote. But there were long stretches of time where and I don't sit. I always stand when I'm there, and where I'm standing there feeling like the world's biggest loser. Look at this loser standing there with his books, and then, people walking by not wanting to make eye contact with a desperate author. And all of those years of experience and accolades and reviews and sales and all the things that happen that make you feel good, like being approached by somebody who says, "Could you sign this book?" They all go out the window. And I actually stood there not even a week ago thinking, who the hell am I to be wasting my time like this? I could be spending time with Liz. I could be spending time with friends. Here I am, big, giant loser, wasting an afternoon to sell a half dozen books, maybe, whatever it was that I'd sold that day. And it's not like I'm going to make good money off of it. I mean, the money that's going to come from these books is going to come through the publishers a year later. It's going to come through distributor, whatever. It's going to be chump change, right? I mean, my lunch I bought that day is probably going to cost more than I earned in those sales. Why the hell am I wasting my life doing this? Who the hell am I to think that I could do anything useful that other people would enjoy? I'm sure you sometimes get that way too. And if you do, I want you to know two things. You're not alone. I still face it, not every day, but regularly enough that I question why I'm doing this. Pragmatically, it does not make a lot of sense. But if you're thinking that, I want to remind you and remind myself of something that's very important. Those stories, those things that you put down, those things that you write and that you share with the world, may not be New York Times bestseller material, may never get turned into television or movies, and may never be talked about around the water cooler on Monday morning after, the book came out and everyone read it over the weekend. But chances are something that you wrote touched someone and reached someone in a deep and meaningful way that you will never know. Don't you owe it to those people? Because isn't that what writing's all about? It's that fundamental human connection. We talked about the nature of relationships and human connections earlier. Your writing itself is a fundamental reaching out to somebody else to let them know they're not alone, to let them know that you understand, that someone else out there gets you and understands you. Think about the stories that you've read that have made an impact on you, the music you've listened to, any of the creative things that you've experienced. They were created by somebody like you who had something that they wanted to share. Please do not deny the world of your talent, your gift, of your unique voice that makes you so special and so wonderful. Because you have, if you have released work into the world, there's probably somebody you've touched or moved, and you will never hear from them. But know that it is so true, and it is so powerful. So I'm going to go back, because this is very therapeutic for myself as well. I'm going to go back to Mark on Saturday afternoon, standing there thinking he's a giant loser, and reminding him that afternoon, while he was thinking he was a giant loser, a few people who had no idea who he was picked up one of his books, had a conversation with him, and potentially were entertained, amused, scared, laughed, whatever it was, because I dared to stand there and help put my work out into the world. And that's an important thing that I have to remind myself of. Because I know probably later today or tomorrow I'm going to be sitting there amongst some amazing writers and go, who the hell am I to be sitting beside them? They're amazing. They're awesome. I love them. Their works are so great. Who the hell am I to be here? And I know you probably face that too. We all face that. So know you're not alone in experiencing that, but also know that there is a reason why you do what you do. There's a reason why you want to be a writer, why you want to share those stories with the world. Don't let go of that. Don't deny the world the beautiful things that you can share with it. I had a bullet point 5. I just didn't write anything. I thought, I'll probably have some sort of conclusion based on what I said. But I think the conclusion is this. I think the most important thing that I can reflect on and share with you, and I hope you're hearing this, and I hope it has meaning to you, is that I'm not a failure. You're not a failure. Don't give up in yourself. Don't give up in what you do as a writer, because what you do is so important. When I look at what's going on in the world today, and I look at the divisiveness, and I look at the hatred and the fear-mongering, and all of the things that seek to divide us, you're more important than ever. The stories you share bring people together, connect people in powerful, deep, and meaningful ways. The world needs the things that you're writing. Please, don't give up on us. Don't give up on us. Please continue to do that. If you get one thing from this rambling reflection from the road, take that. Take the fact that, yeah, probably every other writer out there has those dark feelings and feel like they're a loser, and why should I keep doing this? But you're not alone in that, and I do honestly believe that the world is better off having you in it and having your work in it. Please don't give up on that. You are too important, and the world is too important. It needs you, and it needs that writing. So I'm getting on. The podcast's been going on for a long time, and I would like to get a little bit more work done for my good friends at Drafted Digital, and then get downstairs and connect with some people in person, because that's an important reason why I'm here. And I'm glad that you're here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed this reflections. If you want to share your reflections, you know how to do it. You can share the reflections over at starkreflections.ca, tag me on social media, etc., etc. But as always, thank you so much for letting me bend your ear. And again, yeah, this was a really good therapy session for me. I hope it was a good therapy session for you. And so until next week, which I'm gonna forewarn you right now, next week is probably going to be a rambling reflections from the road where I'm in Victoria, BC. And I'll probably be reflecting from there. I will not have the fancy microphone with me because I don't think I'm going to be able to pack it on the plane, but I will probably be ramblingly reflecting from the road again next week, just to give you a forewarning, and then hope to get back to regular interviews for the next episodes. But until next week, and until next episode, this is, as always, Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you, my friend, great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.